The East African nation of Burundi is yet to administer a single dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. Their only protection is social distancing and hygiene. Supplies of the jab are so low in Uganda that clinics are turning people away. The problem of vaccine inequality still needs fixing. Only 2% of people in low-income countries have received at least one shot, whereas 33% of the global population has already got 2 doses. In some parts of the world, they're already starting to administer a 3rd shot. Welcome, I'm Ben Fazul, and vaccinating the world isn't easy. Experts say it's our best protection, but so many people don't want to believe that, until it's too late in many cases. There's help on its way, with the US donating an extra 1 billion doses, the EU 500 million. But that's still not enough to get everyone on par and really end this pandemic.
For millions around the world, life is back to something like normal. 50,000 at a concert in Denmark. Really, what corona? Easy to say in a country where 80% of people are vaccinated. The scene in Afghanistan couldn't be more different. This desperate man, one of many, critically ill, alive only with the help of a fast-diminishing supply of drugs, oxygen and faith. Quite how bad things are is impossible to know, as testing here is almost non-existent. In Togo, these people are lining up to protect themselves after the government introduced a COVID-19 pass system which only allows vaccinated people into certain places. Yes, if they had not done this, I really wasn't thinking of getting vaccinated. Persuading people is only half the battle when there are just 1.6 million doses for 8 million people. Here at Rio de Janeiro's Remembrance Forest, they're planting trees for the dead. It's in memory of my husband who died of COVID in March of last year. It's hard to talk about. Even after 500,000 lives lost, Brazil continues to be a hotspot. Just 50% of the population have been vaccinated. In part because of scepticism fueled by President Bolsonaro, including this awkward exchange with the British Prime Minister recently, which underlined just how difficult orchestrating a global response to COVID-19 can be. But as the cameras are shuffled out, the Brazilian wags his finger in protest. Not yet, he says.
Well, let's talk about that with Elizabeth Masuto, Doctors Without Borders. Great to have you on the show again. It's actually the 3rd time we've talked about vaccine inequality on this show. This far on into the crisis, how frustrating are those figures for you that only 2% of people in low-income countries have received 1 shot?
It's very frustrating to see, because this is something that we've been talking about last spring already. The world has foreseen it. That's why the COVAX facility was put in place to have, to buy vaccines together, to distribute them together. But what we've seen is vaccine nationalism, which has led to this huge inequality. And this will not help end this pandemic.
When do you think we will see a watershed moment when enough of the world is actually vaccinated that we can stamp out COVID?
We have to keep in mind that scientists are now saying that COVID could become endemic. So we have to use the tools that we have to protect as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. Because we have vaccines that are highly efficient, that can save lives, protect people. And we have treatments and we have tests, but these are not available and affordable for everyone. So I think this will be a watershed moment when there is enough access and we actually can, we can save lives and we can protect ourselves.
But not only that, also enough people willing to take them. I mean, why is it still so hard so far into this pandemic to convince people to get vaccinated? If we look at how many people have been infected, more than 230 million around the world. And how many people have died? Over 4.7 million. I mean, those figures are shocking and really bring home the devastating effect of this pandemic, but people don't seem to care in so many cases.
Well, obviously, from the point of view of a medical organization, we are saying the vaccine is needed. It protects people. It can save lives. So we are calling out everybody who can get the shot, please, to get vaccinated. But the vaccine hesitancy, we've seen it here in Germany. We've seen it in other rich nations. And yes, it is also present in low and middle income countries. So there needs to be more information available. And the biggest problem is still, though, there's not enough vaccines for those people who actually want to get vaccinated. Mm-hmm. So I think these are two components that need to be brought together. So vaccines and more communication and more education about them.
As far as the communication and education goes, is this becoming a pandemic, or has it already become a pandemic of the unvaccinated?
We see it in our project that we have. Yes, there's not enough vaccines available, and where COVID is spreading, we're seeing also the numbers here in Germany. It's mostly the unvaccinated that are being infected. So with this unequal and unfair distribution of vaccines, people in low and middle income countries are disproportionately being infected now with COVID-19. And this is something that should not be happening at this stage. We are still losing roughly 10,000 lives per day to this virus. At a stage where we have effective vaccines to protect against it. And this should not be happening.
On that point, an American journalist was telling me just yesterday, anti-vaxxers on their deathbeds are begging doctors in hospitals for the vaccine, but by then, of course, it's too late, isn't it?
Yes, at that point, it is too late. We now have treatments which, and people in richer countries that have access to oxygen supply and where there are enough emergency and units in hospital available, but obviously these are not available everywhere. So when people don't have the vaccine and they don't have enough treatments also available, they can't protect themselves on the one side, and on the other side they also can't be treated enough. So this is a vicious cycle, and this obviously also not only affects the people but also health systems as a whole.
So, Elisabeth, when do you see us turning a corner? When do you see the world cooperating and really getting on top of this crisis? When do you think it'll be over, basically, is the question I want to ask you.
Well, I hope it will be over soon. I can't name a date because, yes, we have the tools. There's just not enough political will that we are seeing at the moment to actually make this happen as fast as it needs to happen. Just as an example, Germany has promised now to redistribute 100 million doses via the COVAX facility till the end of the year. So far, they have redistributed 5.1 million of those doses. So it's a little share, and we need to get there faster. We need to be there faster. And obviously, redistribution is just one step. When we have more vaccine production worldwide, then there will be more vaccine available. So what we need now is also technology transfer from companies like Moderna, like BioNTech, to actually have more shots in the future. Because as you said in the beginning, some rich countries are now vaccinating for a third time.
Exactly.
So yes, we are ramping up production, but we are also still vaccinating, and a lot of people are still waiting. So these two need to go hand in hand.
Elisabeth Masuta, Doctors Without Borders, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you so much.
And time for one of your questions now. Here's our science correspondent, Derek Williams.
How long do most pandemics last?
To make any predictions about how the COVID-19 pandemic could end, it makes sense to look at past pandemics, since they provide data that could potentially help us predict how long the current one might last. Experts trying to do that tend to focus on the 4 officially recognized respiratory disease pandemics that have occurred in the last 100 years, which were all driven by an old enemy of humanity, influenza. The most recent one was in 2009, when a novel flu strain, commonly called the swine flu, swept the globe, infecting by some estimates up to 1 in 5 people on the planet. Top-end guesses say it might have caused close to 600,000 deaths in the 14 or so months that it raged. The swine flu pandemic was shorter than a flu pandemic in 1968, often called the Hong Kong flu. It was caused by a strain that killed at least 1 million people worldwide, possibly many more. All in all, it lasted a little less than 2 years. A decade before that, a strain that became widely known as the Asian flu killed a similar number of people in the late 1950s. Now, what was really interesting about that pandemic was that it was the first where vaccines played a key role. It's thought that their quick development and distribution saved potentially hundreds of thousands of lives. Finally, there was the granddaddy of all modern flu pandemics, the one that devastated the planet at the end of the First World War, starting in around 1918. It's viewed as the most severe pandemic in recent history. That flu strain infected, we think, around 1/3 of the world's population and killed at least 50 million people over the course of around 3 years. So, to sum it up, those recent pandemics lasted between around a year and 3 years, but they were, of course, caused by flu viruses, not coronaviruses. So trying to draw parallels with the current pandemic, experts say, is a tenuous move at best.